Hello, everybody. Surprise, and believe it or not, I'm back, just like I said I would be. And thank you all for joining me today. This is Peggy Mercer's YouTube channel, and I am back to writing for love and maybe money. I do have projects going. I will tell you about them. I have had some people sign up recently for my YouTube channel because they're interested in poetry. I promised y'all a poetry series, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do poetry part one of a three-part poetry series that will take place over the next few weeks. So welcome to the Peggy Mercer YouTube channel, Writing for Love and Maybe Money, Poetry Part 1. I'm going to teach you in these three YouTube presentments how you can become a best-selling American poet, which, for better or for worse, that's how I'm listed, as a best-selling American poet, and I'm very proud of that. Thank you for joining me. I love every one of you. I hear from so many of you, and thank you for contacting me. Now, I gave a speech once in Kentucky at Louisville University, and I opened by quoting Ursula Le Guin, who said that there had been whole societies that didn't use the wheel, but there had never been a society since the history of mankind that did not scrawl words or figures on the cave walls, that did not dance around the fire and tell stories. So stories, poetry, this is the rhythm of life, and I so invite you to write your own poetry. I'm going to tell you how to get started in just a minute. Now, poetry part one is today. I did have some people call me and say, "Are you all right?" And the truth of the matter is, we had that big hurricane come through here, and all the tornadoes spinning and stuff like that, and it just obliterated this place. The good news is that I am in the restore process. And the great news is that our wonderful President Trump, there's this book, has gotten FEMA on the ball. I know that they have pulled billions of dollars that belong to us commoners back from New York and places like that. They were actually spending that money housing illegals. That's not right, folks. We need the money for the natural disaster here, Hurricane Helene. And so the news from President Trump, and I've already had a visit from an agent, is after 7 months of waiting and worrying about those trees out there filling up my pond, we are going to get the FEMA money, and they are going to help us restore our home places. I thank God for that. I thank God for Trump, and he's doing such a wonderful job. So now let's get on for a few minutes with poetry, part one. So many people ask me, but how do you write poetry? Is it just like fruit basket, turn over, just throw some words out there and call it a poem? And the answer to that is no. To become a best-selling American poet, number one, you must know your poetry formats, and you must know a lot about poetry. The way that you do that is you learn a lot about poetry, or like my friend Carla Sue, you must teach English, and you don't have to be a teacher, but you do have to study, and you do have to learn all about poetry formats. I would say start with reading great poetry. If you don't ever read great poetry, then how do you learn what great poetry is? And of course, if that's what you want to aspire to write, you must read great poetry. Now, and I'm going to tell you about some of the great poets. So learn and study and figure out why certain poems work. Why do they work? Why do certain poems and poetical pieces, why do they just stun you? Why are there moments when you read a great poem and you find tears rolling down your cheeks? Why is it that great poetry is something that you might remember for the rest of your life? And I can already tell you it's because it has the power to touch you. If it doesn't touch the writer, it won't touch the reader or the listener. And so you have to write from the heart. And I can already tell you that a lot of poets, especially the poets that go to these print-on-demand sites, which are nothing mainly but a scam. But if you go to these print-on-demand sites because you have no other way you feel like of getting your poetry out there, that does have a value, but it's not necessarily going to be publishing great poetry. So you must learn your craft. You must study what makes great poetry. Type into the search field on the internet who are considered the great poets of our lifetime, and I'm going to tell you about who some of those are. And you have to ask yourself, when you're writing your own poetry, can the reader or the listener who is maybe listening to an audio of your poetry, can they relate to this? If they can't relate to it, don't write it, because it's not going to be worth the paper that it's printed on. I have friends who are constantly, they're not my friends, but I know people who are constantly writing for what I call shock and awe. They're writing junk, and they're writing vulgar poetry just to get attention. Maybe they have a mental need to get attention. I don't know what the problem is with why they're writing like they're writing and calling it poetry, because it's certainly not poetry. And that is why they pay these enormous reading fees, and then they pay these people to so-called publish them in magazines, so on and so forth. That's not getting published. That's why you're never going to have a readership. That's why you're going to have to give all your books away. And actually what people do, and I've been told this, people throw this stuff in the trash can when you walk off. Okay, so what separates the wannabe poet, the person that says, oh, I got this published in 900 publications? Well, so what? You paid for every one of them. You don't call that being a published poet. You call that being a printed poet, and it has something to do with your ego and your need to say that you are a published poet. Well, I can understand that too. And so even writing your poetry down may give you some satisfaction. However, let me talk about poetry. So you've got your notebook out, I hope, and you're going to take a few notes here. Now, once you begin your love of poetry, which I hope if you're young, it'll last you for a lifetime. I had a young lady whose name was Caroline that I once tutored, and she loved poetry. Hello, Caroline, wherever you are, I hope you're writing stories, because you sure loved them back then when you were 6 years old. And she had a feel for detail. There are some poets who, their images that they created in their poetry and their plays and so on that they wrote are just phenomenal. So there are poets that stand out, and who are some of these? Of course, Shakespeare comes to mind. Shakespeare wrote sonnets, as you well know. He wrote those 14-line iambic pentameter formats, and he wrote rhymes, and his rhymes actually had a format. He stunned us all with his beautiful writing. Shakespeare's one. I want to talk about some of them. Amy Robert Frost, Rod McEwen, some great poets, and I'm going to get some of their books out of them right here. And in the next video, I'm going to read you some poetry. One of the great poets that I'm thinking about right now, right off the cuff, is a poet that I just absolutely love his writing, Bertolt Brecht, the German, who was also a very famous playwright and actually changed the way that they do plays and movies and stuff, in that he created the epic theater, theatrical attitude, and I just really love that. His images that he created in poetry were just life-changing. People would read this and say, oh my goodness, what a poet he is. And of course he won lots of prizes. One of the things that Brecht did, he created images. So you have to ask yourself as you're writing poetry, can the reader see this? Am I painting a picture? Look at the work of Thoreau and some of the other writers. Look at the free verse writer, Rod McEwen. And so you have to decide to learn about poetry, learn about the formats, learn about the quatrains, the sonnets written by Shakespeare, learn about the formats that they used, learn about the rhyming schemes. Was it A-B, a lot of Shakespeare? Was it A-B-B, or was it A-B-C? Were the stanzas in a certain rhyming scheme? Now, if you're shooting for a book of poetry, ask yourself early on, and people will say, no, just write it and then ask yourself. But I say that a little bit backwards. Take a lot of notes and know where you're going when you start. That way you can go through. People will say, oh, just write it and let it happen and just get the writing down first. I do think you should write a first draft, but I also think when you get started that you should have an idea of where you're going. What is going to be the theme? I am currently working on a book of poetry that I hope is going to be some great inspirational influence, called I See the Light. And I hope and pray that you'll get it. Some of my books of poetry are out on Amazon. This is kind of crude. It's called Come By, Come By Here. I don't know how many of you know that song was written in Darien, Georgia by a descendant of Geechees. And the poems are in here and they're in parts, and you can get that off Amazon. I did have a book of poetry some years ago that was published by Thomas Max, and that's my good friend Lee Clevenger up in Atlanta. He has a small company up there and they do really well. And I have some absolutely wonderful comments, and there's one right there by Taylor Swift, who reads all my stuff. And these are the only two books that I have right now that have poetry in them. This one, which was a literary award winner by the Georgia Independent Literary Award, the Georgia Independent Artist. This one just a few years ago, and it won that Georgia Independent Author of the Year for memoir. And you see, this is the Spring Journey of Hibiscus Magnolia. All of those are on Amazon, and you can go to my author page and look up This Is Poetry. These books were listed, I'm so proud to say, right on a page by Edgar Allan Poe, right on a page by Judy Blume, right on a page with some of the best writers of our time. And I was just so honored, and I want to say I was humbled, but you know what? God forgive me, I'm just not all that humble when it comes down to it, because I have learned my format. I've learned what it takes to put good writing out there. These books were all bestsellers. This is a a fact of my life, as I have learned, and I know what I'm doing when it comes to poetry. Now, we're going to talk some more in video number 2 here about I'm going to teach you how to write a cinquain and tell you where that format comes from. I'm going to teach you how that the use of the word that is a big no-no. People just write and they don't come back and tighten their writing up. And Bertolt Brecht, he tightened his writing up. He had such vivid images that I could see the coal cars going along and the coal being thrown out to the children as it went by. I urge you to write from your heart. If you had a terrible childhood, write some of it down. If you had a wonderful childhood with a military father, maybe traveling the world, write about that. But you have to write some of the stuff that you know. And you might say, well, I can learn all about that and then I can just write that. Well, no, I don't think so. Here's a note on Shakespeare's format. A lot of times it was A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and a G, G rhyme scheme. So what makes it a rhyme scheme? Do you remember the song by Kenny Chesney, "In the morning I'm leaving, making my way back to Cleveland, but tonight I'll be just fine. And I don't see how you can be anything but mine." Hello, Kenny Chesney, my friend, and I love that song. And that's AAB format, AAB format. And I can tell you that you have to know your format. Are you going to write a verse and it's going to have 2 stanzas maybe of 4 lines each? If so, what's the rhyming scheme going to be? Is it going to be near rhymes or clear rhymes, and so on and so forth? So get your notebook out and start writing your poetry. Choose a theme. Is this going to be stories of my life, from stories of my life? Is this going to be stories of my children? Is this going to be stories of some of the animals that I've kept and loved so much? And I have a house full of cats and kittens right now, if anybody's in the market for a mama and some of her children. And I am putting them in the pool and teaching them how to swim. And that's a joke right there, but they are in a little empty pool playing in the living room right now. And I think that's just so much fun, so I can write about my cats, just like Rod McEwen wrote that poem about Sloopy, his cat. And so that is something that I remember very well. To become a great American poetry, you must learn about poetry. Study the great poets. Study why their writing set them apart. Study why their books became bestsellers. All of my crude little books. Years ago when I stopped working with the New York publishers, and I'm not totally done with them yet, I can tell you I do have stuff coming down the pipeline with some really biggest publishers in the world. But I can tell you right now that when I stopped working with the big companies years ago, and I started learning how to put my books together, all of my books have been on the bestseller list, and some of them on 2 or 3 lists. I am very mighty proud right now to say that I have been nominated for the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame, and that is the honor of a lifetime just to even be nominated, and we don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. Now, I will tell you a few more things that are very important, and I ask all of you to be in prayer for me. I do have a little bit of a health issue going on, and I will tell you all about that a little bit later. Part 2, poetry. I'm going to pull out specific formats to teach you how to write your poem in that format. I'll be back later this week. I pray. Hit by a hurricane and then hit by a little bit of a health issue going on. So please be in prayer for me that I will be back with the Peggy Mercer YouTube channel, Poetry Part 2. Please hop over there and subscribe to this channel. I am getting it going again. I'm sorry that I've been absent. I'm missing in action. I do want to close by giving you a quote from Bertolt Brecht and one of his poems, which is one of my favorite poems. A couple of his lines go like this: in the dark times, will there also be singing? Yes, there will be singing about the dark times. I love you all. Bye bye.